Thing that was promised around a year ago has actually turned up. It's 50 Cent's Diddy documentary. It's 4 parts, 4 hours long, and it's a walk through Diddy's life.
You ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy, him and his boy. They're having the times of their lives, like you know, where we hanging out and what we doing. We can't really disclose.
I think the person that the you of then was on a path of self-destruction. Do you feel that you were self-destructing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would have, for sure. 100%. Yeah. 100%. It would have been no bueno. It was bad. It would have been, yeah. I don't know if I'd be alive, for sure. It was dark, really dark.
Before we go any further, pause for a second. If you care about what really happens behind closed doors in the music industry, hit like right now, subscribe for deeper investigations, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story only gets darker from here. When 50 Cent's documentary finally landed, most people assumed it would be explosive, but few expected the silence surrounding what was left out. The footage that aired already shook hip-hop, yet insiders immediately began whispering about scenes that never made the cut. Not because they were boring, but because they were dangerous. This wasn't about editing for time. It was about risk. Netflix presented a controlled narrative, but the timeline reveals cracks almost immediately. Certain names disappeared, entire storylines vanished, and when you line up the dates, you realize something critical happened behind the scenes. Decisions were made quickly, quietly, and with clear boundaries. The documentary didn't just expose Diddy. It exposed how much power still exists over what the public is allowed to see. This act sets the foundation, not by accusing, but by asking why. Why did a 4-hour series feel incomplete? Why did witnesses suddenly stop appearing? And why did removed footage begin circulating online just days after release? Because when truth threatens systems, it doesn't get erased. It gets delayed.
50 Cent has been working on this documentary for almost 2 years. The footage he has is insane. The people he got speaking about Diddy is ridiculous. And
the missing footage didn't disappear by accident. According to multiple insiders, entire interview segments were filmed, reviewed, and then deliberately shelved. These weren't random stories either. They followed a pattern. Each one pointed toward moments where loyalty collapsed and fear replaced trust. What's striking is how consistently the same figures reappear in off-camera accounts, yet remain absent on screen. The editing choices tell their own story. You can track where conversations were cut mid-arc, where emotional beats suddenly jump, and where context is clearly missing. This is where investigative watching matters. When streaming platforms step in, they don't just distribute content, they manage liability. Every second included carries legal weight. That means anything unverifiable, unpredictable, or uncontrollable becomes a threat. The result is a version of events that feels clean, but hollow. Viewers sense it instinctively. That's why reaction videos exploded. People weren't responding to what they saw. They were responding to what felt deliberately avoided. This act isn't about proving guilt. It's about recognizing absence. Silence can be louder than testimony, especially when it's systematic. When the same types of stories are consistently excluded, the question shifts from what happened to who decided this couldn't be shown. And once you ask that, the entire documentary transforms from revelation into evidence of restraint.
Did they talk about the man who nutted on his nipples?
I didn't hear the nut on the nipples.
50 was not about to put that
Did not talk about the nut on
there.
nipples, but they do have jurors in there that
He
talk
should have
about.
put that after the sanitizer part.
Yes.
One of the most revealing elements is timing. The documentary dropped, and within 24 hours, new legal filings surfaced that reframed everything viewers thought they understood. That's not coincidence. That's collision. It suggests the story was already moving faster than the edit. While audiences were digesting the Netflix version, reality was updating in real time. This matters because it exposes a gap between cultural storytelling and legal momentum. Documentaries freeze narratives. Courts don't. When allegations expand after release, it highlights how limited the final cut truly was. This act examines how carefully timed releases can unintentionally expose what they attempt to contain. The platform framed the story as retrospective. The world responded as if it were ongoing. That tension created confusion, speculation, and panic across the industry. Suddenly, names once considered untouchable were being mentioned again, not because of evidence shown, but because of evidence omitted. The public began connecting dots that the documentary never drew. This is how narratives escape control. Once viewers realize they're seeing a partial picture, they start searching for the rest. And when they do, platforms lose authority over interpretation. What was meant to feel definitive, instead, feels cautious. And caution, in moments like this, reads as fear.
Early this morning in Los Angeles, the 24-year-old rapper whose real name is Christopher Wallace lived in Raleigh in the 1980s.
FBI agents are looking for a man they say could.
Both communities are mourning the death of the rapper known as Notorious B.I.G.
Behind every deleted scene is a negotiation. Editors don't just remove content, they weigh consequences. This act focuses on the individuals who were reportedly interviewed but never appeared. Some backed out, some were advised to step away, others were simply deemed too volatile. The common thread wasn't credibility, it was unpredictability. First-hand witnesses don't always speak in clean sound bites. They ramble, contradict, and sometimes reveal more than intended. That's dangerous for a platform aiming to maintain narrative control. What's unsettling is how often former insiders describe being contacted after filming, not to clarify facts, but to reassess participation. That suggests concern, not correction. When multiple sources independently describe the same pressure, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like strategy. This doesn't mean everything said off-camera was true. It means it was uncontrollable. And in high-stakes storytelling, control is everything. The act reveals how modern documentaries balance truth against exposure. Not exposure of subjects, but exposure of themselves. Because once something airs, it can't be pulled back. And some truths aren't risky because they're false. They're risky because they're unfinished.
I actually was trapped in a hotel.
Now I want to ask a question. What do you mean trapped?
It was about probably like 70 or so bloods in the hallway. I couldn't even leave my room.
The internet filled the gaps immediately. Reaction channels, archived interviews, and resurfaced clips became the unofficial extended cut. This act explores how decentralized storytelling now competes with polished productions. Once viewers sense omission, they turn to fragments. Old interviews take on new meaning. Casual remarks become evidence. Context collapses. That's the danger of partial disclosure. It invites over-interpretation. But it also exposes something important. People don't trust singular narratives anymore. They cross-reference instinctively. When platforms fail to address obvious questions, audiences crowdsource answers. This is where speculation thrives, but it's also where suppressed information re-emerges. The irony is that withholding content often amplifies it. Deleted scenes become more powerful than included ones. They gain mythic status. The absence fuels curiosity, and curiosity drives virality. This act shows how the documentary inadvertently created its own underground sequel. One built not by filmmakers, but by viewers piecing together what they believe they weren't meant to see. In trying to minimize risk, the platform may have multiplied it. Because once a story fractures, no single voice controls how it spreads.
Early that morning, when Puff had got on a plane and left Mace, we went and got him and let him, some dudes from Black Hands, we went and got Mace. Mace came down, went to his car, and he got up out of it.
There's also a psychological layer to omission. When authority avoids certain topics, it signals boundaries. This act examines how power communicates without speaking. Viewers subconsciously register when something feels protected. That perception reshapes trust. Suddenly, the documentary isn't just about Diddy, it's about the system that allowed proximity without accountability. This is where broader implications emerge. If certain relationships can't be examined publicly, what does that say about cultural gatekeeping? The act doesn't accuse individuals, it questions structures. Fame, faith, media, and influence overlap in ways rarely scrutinized. When those intersections appear briefly and then vanish from the narrative, it raises alarms. Not because something illegal is proven, but because scrutiny itself seems restricted. This subtle avoidance is more damaging than explicit denial. It suggests that some conversations are still off limits. And when audiences sense that, trust erodes. Transparency isn't about exposing everything. It's about explaining why something can't be shown. Silence leaves interpretation open. And in the absence of explanation, people assume the worst. That's not hysteria. That's pattern recognition.
Well, overseas, Jay-Z is one of the biggest music moguls in the world, but this morning he's facing shocking allegations. The rapper denying claims he raped a 13-year-old girl.
What makes this case unique is who is asking the questions. 50 Cent isn't an outsider journalist. He's an insider, willing to challenge another insider. That dynamic changes everything. This act explores how credibility shifts when criticism comes from within the culture. It's harder to dismiss as ignorance, but it's also harder to fully support without consequence. That's why the documentary walks a tightrope. It pushes just far enough to provoke conversation, but not far enough to detonate relationships. This balancing act is visible throughout. Moments of confrontation are followed by restraint. Allegations are contextualized, not concluded. That's intentional. It preserves plausible deniability. But it also limits resolution. The audience is left suspended. And suspension is uncomfortable. This act argues that discomfort is the point. Not closure, not answers. Awareness. By stopping short, the documentary forces viewers to continue the investigation themselves. It offloads responsibility. That's powerful, but also dangerous, because once control is relinquished, narratives mutate, and truth becomes fragmented.
Terrence is back in the headlines, not for acting, not for awards, but for calling out the machine. It all started with that viral interview on the PBD podcast. Terrence straight up said Diddy tried to pull him into some freaky behind-the-scenes invite and that he refused to give up his man card. He doubled down, saying Hollywood blacklisted him for not playing along. According to Terrence, this kind of thing happens a lot in the industry, but everyone's too scared to talk.
In the end, this isn't about what Netflix showed or didn't show. It's about what the reaction reveals. This final act pulls back completely. The real exposure isn't a scene or a clip. It's the realization that even now, certain stories require negotiation to exist. The documentary didn't end a conversation. It started one the industry can't easily contain. Whether future footage surfaces or not, almost becomes irrelevant. The damage is already done. Trust has shifted. Audiences now watch with suspicion, not acceptance. And that's irreversible.
That's more
This story proves that silence no longer protects reputations. It magnifies scrutiny.
You gotta get the shoes though.
Every
Y'all know what it
omission
is.
becomes a question mark. Every edit becomes a statement. The power once held by platforms is now shared with viewers willing to dig. That's the real reckoning. Not a verdict, not a headline, a change in how truth moves. And once that shift happens, no documentary, no matter how controlled, can fully stop it. The story keeps evolving, with or without permission.
You ever seen the movie 48 Hours? Right now, he's having 48 hours with Diddy, him and his boy. They're having the times of their lives, you know, where we hanging out and what we doing. We can't really disclose.
One of the most overlooked elements in stories like this is proximity. Not participation, not accusation, simply closeness. History shows that power doesn't always operate through action, it operates through access. Being near decision makers changes outcomes even when nothing illegal occurs. This act examines how proximity itself becomes a shield. When influential figures share rooms, stages, and private conversations, accountability becomes blurred. People stop asking hard questions because relationships complicate consequences. This is why documentaries often struggle to map influence honestly. It's easier to focus on one central figure than to explore the ecosystem around them. Yet, ecosystems create behavior. They normalize silence, they reward loyalty, and they punish disruption. In this case, proximity wasn't evidence of wrongdoing, it was evidence of insulation. The closer someone stood to power, the less likely they were to be examined publicly. That pattern repeats across industries. Music, film, politics, faith. The story here isn't about what happened behind closed doors. It's about how those doors stayed closed for decades.
I think the person that you of then was on a path of self-destruction. Do you feel that you were you were self-destructing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would have, for sure. 100%. Yeah. 100%. It would have been no bueno. It was bad. It would have been, yeah. I don't know if I'd be alive, for sure. It was dark, really dark. So I'm very, very grateful to have influences in my life that have played a huge part in me seeing their relationship with Jesus and their relationship with their wives and their relationship with their kids and saying,
what's striking is that no direct threats ever needed to be made. Fear functioned without instruction. This act explores how environments of influence condition people to self-censor. Careers depend on perception. Invitations matter. Silence becomes a survival skill. Many insiders didn't need to be warned. They already knew the cost of speaking out. That's why interviews trail off. That's why stories soften over time. Not because memories fade, but because consequences remain. Fear doesn't always come from danger. Sometimes it comes from knowing how fast opportunity disappears. The documentary hints at this without naming it. You can hear it in pauses, in careful phrasing, in what people almost say, then don't. This isn't conspiracy, it's conditioning. Industries train participants to protect the brand first. Truth becomes negotiable. The result is a culture where silence feels safer than honesty, even when honesty isn't illegal, just inconvenient.
I moved to New York City, and I lived with Sean Puffy Combs for a year.
Streaming platforms aren't moral arbiters. They're risk managers. This act breaks down why gray areas are more dangerous than clear allegations. Courts handle facts. Audiences handle emotion. Gray areas trigger speculation, outrage, and misinterpretation. From a platform perspective, that's uncontrollable. That's why documentaries often draw sharp lines. Guilty, innocent, accused, convicted. But reality doesn't work that way. Influence exists between those lines. Netflix avoided sections that couldn't be neatly framed. Not because they were false, but because they were incomplete. And incomplete truths are harder to defend than complete lies. This act shows how omission is often less about protection and more about containment. Platforms don't ask, is this true? They ask, can we manage the fallout? When the answer is no, the content disappears.
But these are places that a 13-year-old probably should not be.
Once the documentary aired, the internet became the courtroom Netflix avoided. This act explores how digital audiences now function as investigators. Clips are replayed, timelines are reconstructed, patterns are crowdsourced. This isn't justice, but it is momentum. The danger is that online judgment doesn't wait for evidence. It responds to implication. And implication spreads faster than proof. The documentary didn't accuse many people, but the audience did. That shift matters. Platforms used to control narrative flow. Now they release it into an environment that reshapes it instantly. This act highlights how omission doesn't prevent scrutiny. It redirects it. The story escapes its container. And once it does, No disclaimer can pull it back.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you seeing?
I went there to see the lifestyle.
Right.
And I saw it. It was pretty wild.
So no-
What I did say is that there were very curious things taking place. And I didn't necessarily understand it.
Reputation isn't just image, it's currency. This act explains how reputations are built collectively and defended collectively. When one figure falls, others scramble to protect distance, even retroactively. Old photos vanish. Statements are revised, associations are reframed. That doesn't imply guilt, it implies value. When reputations hold financial, cultural, and institutional weight, people guard them instinctively. The documentary captured a moment when that guarding became visible. Not through denial, but through absence. The absence of voices, the absence of names, the absence of context. These gaps weren't random. They followed the value chain. The more influence attached to a name, the less likely it was to appear.
You're a dad now. Would you ever send your kid to Puffy camp?
Hell no.
Many viewers expected answers. The documentary never promised them. This act reframes the project entirely. The goal wasn't closure. It was exposure of imbalance. By stopping short, the documentary forced viewers to confront uncertainty. That's uncomfortable, but intentional. Closure would have ended the conversation. Ambiguity keeps it alive. This approach shifts responsibility from filmmaker to audience. It asks viewers not to consume truth, but to wrestle with it. That's rare and risky. But it explains why the series ends the way it does. Unresolved, restrained, and unsettling. Not because nothing happened, but because not everything can be packaged safely.
When people talk about 50 making this documentary about Diddy, they act like it's just jokes and trolling. But if you really know hip-hop history, you know there's another layer to this. And that layer is Chris Lighty. Chris Lighty wasn't just a manager. He was one of the most respected executives in hip-hop. He helped shape the culture. He built brands. He changed artists' lives, including 50 Cent. To 50, Chris wasn't just business. He was family. He was loyalty. He was one of the good ones in an industry filled with predators and politics. When Chris died, the official story never sat right with a lot of people. Not because anyone pointed fingers directly, but because the narrative felt incomplete. It felt rushed. It felt too neat for a man whose life was everything but neat. And if you pay attention to 50, he has never truly healed from that loss. He never believed Chris got the respect or the truth he deserved. 50 has watched this industry protect certain men, while the good ones get overshadowed, pushed out, or destroyed. He's seen how power works behind the scenes. He's seen how fear has kept people silent, and he's seen how many lies get buried because someone is too powerful to even challenge. So when people say, why is 50 Cent doing this? Why is he going so hard at Diddy? I don't think people realize this may not be about pettiness at all. It might just be about justice. It might be about balance. It might just be about exposing the kind of corruption that men like Diddy create and Chris Lighty never benefited from, but was swallowed by. 50 didn't just make a documentary. He made a statement, a challenge to the industry that thinks it's untouchable. People say 50 is petty. No. 50 moves with purpose. And if you know the history, if you know what Chris Lighty meant to him, you know the patterns of abuse, fear, and manipulation that this documentary exposed, then this documentary starts to look less like entertainment and more like a man that wanted justice to be served and to finally tell the truth about the industry. And so many people wanted these things to just disappear. So yeah, maybe 50 didn't just clown Diddy. Maybe he avenged the people that the industry failed. And Chris Lighty, he might have been at the top of that list.
Breaking news, something that I've never told anybody. This is a secret, something that, will probably be in my book, but I'm telling y'all right now. The day that Biggie was killed, he wasn't supposed to be in LA. That morning, I got a call from Biggie, and I've never told anybody this in an interview or anything. I got a call from Biggie, and Biggie said, I don't want you to be mad at me, but I'm about to jerk you up. And I'm like, pause, I'm about to go left on something. That's a better word. And I'm like, what you talking about? You know, I would always be on him about like, you know, we young, black entrepreneurs, businessmen, we have to be on time. We have to be prompt. He said, he was supposed to go to London. He called me, said, I'm not going to London. He's like, I just finished my album. I want to hang out with you tonight. There's a party tonight. I want to celebrate with you. I'm like, come on, big, get on the plane. You have to go get on the plane. He was like, I'll go tomorrow. Just tell him I'm sick. Please, please, please. You know, we haven't hung out in a long time. Can we just all hang out together? Just the whole crew, Bad Boy, Junior Mafia. Let's just go celebrate this album. It's like some of my best work. We made it through all of this bullshit. Please. I said, yes. All right, we'll hang out. You know, it's a call that I always remember. Not for the fact it wasn't me. Wasn't a way that I could talk him out of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I didn't run Biggie. He was his own man at the end of the day, and he just wasn't gonna go. So it was just the call just plays over and over in my head. I'm like, what if he would have just got on the plane? So that's something that y'all didn't know. So, you know, some things are just meant to be for reasons that are beyond and above.
The real reckoning isn't legal. It's cultural. This final act brings everything together. The documentary didn't destroy anyone. It exposed how systems delay accountability, how power outlives scandal, how silence operates efficiently, and how truth moves slower than influence, but never stops. What happens next isn't about new footage. It's about changed perception. Audiences now recognize patterns they once ignored. Proximity, silence, timing, omission. Once seen, they can't be unseen. That's the lasting impact. Not a verdict. Not a headline. Awareness. And awareness is irreversible.